So, picture this. You flip the blender on, and like a split second too late, you realize the lid is off.
Oh, no!
Yeah. Blueberry smoothie just violently hits the ceiling, splatters all across your pristine white cabinets, and, completely coats your
The
face.
absolute worst feeling.
Right. And that sudden, just helpless panic, that really intense, visceral realization that things have instantly spiraled out of your control and, well, you are the only one who can clean it up.
Yeah.
That is exactly what it feels like to parent a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old in the exact same room.
It really is. It's a lot.
It's so much. You are trying to manage these two incredibly intense, rapidly developing little humans, basically dodging flying emotional fruit all day. And most days, it feels like you are purely surviving.
Just trying to make it to bedtime.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what if the chaos isn't actually a failure? What if it is highly predictable biology? So for you, the listener who is deep in those trenches right now, we have a real mission today.
We do. Our goal today is to pull you out of that survival mode
Right.
and, get you into a place of profound, actionable understanding.
Right.
We're going to look at the hard science of child development, the psychological blueprints for conflict, and some honestly fascinating biological shifts that are happening inside of you as a parent.
I can't wait to get into that part.
Yeah, it's wild. We are synthesizing a massive amount of clinical data today. We've got development milestones from the CDC and the American Academy of Pediatrics.
We've also got sibling conflict resolution strategies from the Greater Good Science Center, right?
Yes, and insights from Dr. Siggy, plus these amazing biological studies on fatherhood from Father Matters. We're going to decode exactly what is happening in your house and, more importantly, how to navigate it so everyone actually thrives.
Okay, let's unpack this, because before we can even begin to talk about how to parent these two together or, how fatherhood and motherhood play these distinct roles, we have to look under the hood.
We really do.
We need to understand the vastly different neurological hardware each of your children is currently running on.
Right, because you aren't just raising two children. I mean, you are managing two completely different biological operating systems.
Like a Mac and a PC trying to talk to each other.
Exactly. So let's look at the 3-year-old first. At 3 years old, a child is living entirely, relentlessly in the present tense.
There is no past, there is no future. Just now.
Just right now. And to understand why, we have to look at the brain's actual architecture. Deep inside the brain is this little structure called the amygdala.
Okay.
Think of the amygdala as the brain's alarm system or, its emotional gas pedal that processes fear, excitement, anger, threat. And in a 3-year-old, the amygdala is fully operational,
Fully online.
and incredibly sensitive.
So they have the capacity for massive emotion. Basically, the gas pedal is constantly being slammed to the floor.
Yes. And, that would actually be fine if they had the corresponding braking system.
But they don't.
They don't. The brakes are located in the prefrontal cortex, which is the area right behind the forehead. That's the part responsible for impulse control, logical sequencing, planning ahead.
And in a 3-year-old,
In a 3-year-old, the prefrontal cortex is basically a construction zone. I mean, it is barely online at all.
Okay, so usually people use that tired old sports car metaphor, huge engine, no brakes. But it really sounds more like a world-class symphony orchestra that just hasn't hired a conductor yet.
Oh, I love that.
Like every single instrument, the joy, the frustration, the curiosity is playing beautifully, but they're playing at maximum volume, completely at random.
Yeah, and there is absolutely nobody at the podium to tell the brass section to quiet down.
Exactly.
That is a much more accurate way to visualize it.
Yeah.
They have all the drive and energy, but the regulatory mechanism to coordinate those impulses or to just slow them down, it simply does not physically exist yet.
It's just not there.
Right. They are experiencing the world in high definition and high volume, completely without the neurological filter to process it calmly.
Wait, hold on, though. Because I look at my 3-year-old sometimes, and, I see them holding a cup of milk, right? They look me dead in the eye. A slow, calculating smile creeps across their face, and they deliberately tilt the cup until the milk completely soaks the freshly vacuumed rug.
The classic stare down.
Yes. And when they do that, it feels incredibly calculated. It does not feel like an orchestra without a conductor. It feels like targeted, malicious defiance.
I know.
Are we really just letting them off the hook and blaming a lack of a prefrontal cortex?
It absolutely feels like a personal attack in that moment.
Yeah.
It really does. But we naturally project adult motivations onto their behavior because that's what our adult brains do.
Right. If my husband poured milk on the rug while staring at me, that's a problem.
A huge problem.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to look at the cognitive mechanism behind what the child is actually doing.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't defiance in the way an adult understands defiance.
Okay.
Because adult defiance implies a malicious intent to cause you distress. For a 3-year-old, it is a profound need to test cause and effect. They are driven by a brain that is desperate to map the physical and social rules of the universe.
So they aren't thinking, I want to ruin my parents' afternoon.
Not at all.
They're basically running a physics and sociology experiment simultaneously.
Wow. They're tiny empirical scientists.
Yeah.
The thought process is much closer to, okay, if I tilt this cup, I know gravity pulls the liquid down. Will gravity work the exact same way today as it did yesterday?
Let's find out.
Let's find out. And then when the liquid hits the floor, my parents' face contorts and their volume drastically increases. Will that happen again? Let's run the trial.
Wow. So they are just logging the data.
Exactly. It is pure exploration of physical boundaries and social reactions. And it's uninhibited by the prefrontal cortex, which in an older kid would whisper, hey, maybe don't do that, you'll get in trouble.
That reframes the entire milk spilling incident. They are just trying to figure out if the laws of thermodynamics and, well, parental patience are consistent.
Which is the exact same neurological drive behind the infamous why phase.
Oh, the why phase. It never ends.
It really doesn't.
Yeah.
A 3-year-old talks constantly and asks why endlessly. Why is the sky blue? Why does the bird fly? Why does the bird have feathers?
Right.
But developmental psychologists stress how vital this is. When you actually take the time to answer those whys, you are doing so much more than just providing trivia.
You're literally wiring their brain for curiosity.
Down to the physical synapses.
Right.
Every single time you engage in that loop, they ask, you answer, they process you.
Yeah.
You are myelinating the neural pathways associated with inquiry and learning.
Wait, break that down for me. Myelinating.
Yeah, so myelin is this fatty sheath that coats neurons in the brain. Think of it like insulation on a copper wire. It makes the electrical signals travel much faster and more efficiently.
Oh.
So when you answer their questions, you are physically upgrading their brain's processing speed.
That is wild.
And furthermore, they are beginning to map spatial relationships. They start using simple prepositions like on, under, behind.
Yeah.
The world is just becoming this 3-dimensional puzzle they are desperately trying to solve.
Okay, so knowing this neurological reality that they have a hyperactive amygdala, an under construction prefrontal cortex, and this drive to empirically test absolutely everything, what is the most effective way to actually parent them?
Right.
Like, what do they need from us to thrive in this specific phase?
They need you to act as their external prefrontal cortex.
Right.
You have to be the conductor for their orchestra. And practically that translates to highly, highly predictable routines.
Why are routines so important for them?
Well, routines act as cognitive shortcuts. For a brain that is already working overtime just to process basic sensory input, having to make decisions or constantly guess what happens next, it causes massive decision fatigue.
Yeah, I see.
Predictability conserves their very limited metabolic energy so they can use it for emotional regulation instead.
That makes total sense. Like, if they know that after dinner comes bath, and after bath comes books, their brain doesn't have to spend glucose worrying about the future.
Exactly. It's already mapped out for them.
Okay, but what about when I actually need them to do something new?
When you need them to act, the instructions must be incredibly short and simple, like one step at a time.
Right, because their memory isn't great.
Exactly. An adult might say, go upstairs, put your toys in the bin, and grab your sneakers so we can leave.
I say that all the time.
We all do. But a 3-year-old's working memory simply cannot hold a 3-part sequence. By the time they hit the top of the stairs, the entire sequence has evaporated and they just start playing with a fire truck.
I literally watched this happen yesterday, so the instruction just needs to be, let's go to the stairs.
Yes, just that. And crucially, they need your physical presence during transitions.
What do you mean by transitions?
Moving from playtime to bath time, or leaving the house to get into the car seat. These shifts are deeply neurologically taxing for them.
Because they have to switch gears.
Right. It requires them to halt a rewarding activity and initiate a less desirable one. That is a pure prefrontal cortex task.
Which they don't have.
Exactly. So your physical proximity, like a hand on the shoulder or a gentle physical guide, it acts as a biological anchor. It actually helps downregulate their nervous system during the shift.
Okay, so that is the 3-year-old. the brilliant, chaotic, conductorless orchestra. But then you pan across the living room and there is your 5-year-old.
Yes.
And the contrast is just staggering. Sometimes it feels like they belong to a completely different species.
Because cognitively, they kind of do. The leap that occurs between month 36 and month 60 is arguably one of the most profound reorganizations in the entire human lifespan.
Wow.
Yes. The 5-year-old is no longer just a bundle of impulses testing gravity. They are becoming a highly distinct individual with actual emerging logic. Their prefrontal cortex has undergone massive development.
They can actually perceive time now, right? Because we said a 3-year-old only understands now, but a 5-year-old actually grasps yesterday and tomorrow.
Time perception is a huge cognitive milestone. Understanding that the past is fixed and the future is variable, that's what allows them to plan.
Right.
And this is exactly why they can easily follow those 3-part commands that baffle the 3-year-old. Their working memory has expanded.
So I can say, go upstairs, grab your shoes, and bring them down.
Yes, mostly. And from a physical milestone perspective, they are crossing the midline of their body with ease. They're copying capital letters and drawing representations of people that actually have distinct body parts rather than just, a circle with legs.
I love the circle with legs drawings, though. But
Yeah.
the emotional and social leap is even more fascinating to me. They start exhibiting this real, sometimes very rigid sense of fairness.
Oh, yes. Very rigid.
And they can negotiate verbally instead of just screaming when they want something. And the empathy. Like, if the 3-year-old falls down and scrapes a knee, the 5-year-old might actually register their distress, feel a mirrored emotional response, and go get a Band-Aid.
What's really fascinating here is how that empathy develops. It requires something called theory of mind.
Theory of mind.
Yeah, it's the cognitive realization that other people have thoughts, feelings, and perspectives that are entirely separate from their own.
Okay.
The 3-year-old lacks this. They just assume everyone knows what they know and feels exactly what they feel.
Like when they close their eyes and think you can't see them.
Exactly. But the 5-year-old realizes, hey, my brother is hurting. Even though I am not hurting, I should help. It is the birth of true social integration.
Treating a 5-year-old like a 3-year-old is a recipe for disaster, then. What do they require to thrive with this upgraded operating system?
They need to be held to a slightly higher standard, but critically, without shame when they fall short.
Without shame. That's key.
Because their logic is emerging, they need real, tangible responsibilities that impact the family unit. Setting the table, sorting the laundry by color, feeding a pet.
Why does that matter so much?
It gives them a profound sense of agency and belonging.
It transitions them from just being a consumer in the household to actually being a contributor.
Beautifully said. And because they can reason, they absolutely require explanations.
You mean I can't just say because I said so anymore?
Nope. For the 3-year-old, because I said so might just be a confusing end to a conversation. But for a 5-year-old, because I said so is deeply frustrating.
Why is it frustrating?
Because their brain is actively hunting for the logical variable in the equation. They need the why behind the rule. So saying, we hold hands in the parking lot so the cars can see us, provides the exact logic their brain is hungry for.
Okay, so we have the 5-year-old who is developing logic, a sense of fairness, and this need for explanations. And we have the 3-year-old who is pure impulse, empirically testing the world and living entirely in the moment. You put those two distinct operating systems in the exact same room, competing for the exact same toys and fighting for the exact same parent's attention.
It is an environment engineered for friction. It is just unavoidable.
Which brings us to the absolute crucible of sibling conflict. If you are parenting a 3- and 5-year-old, this is likely the #1 source of daily stress for you.
Easily.
But there is a major paradigm shift we need to make here. Rather than viewing this daily friction as a failure of your parenting or, a grim sign that your kids are destined to be estranged adults, the psychological frameworks reframe this friction as developmental gold.
Developmental gold.
Yeah.
The sibling relationship is the first, the safest, and really the most enduring laboratory your children will ever have for learning how to navigate complex human dynamics.
It's practice for the real world.
Exactly. Think about what happens during a fight over a toy. They're learning how to negotiate, how to assert boundaries, how to process the bitter pill of frustration, and most importantly, how to repair a relationship after a rupture.
Right.
If you engineer their environment to eliminate all conflict, like buying 2 of everything or constantly keeping them separated, you eliminate the laboratory entirely.
So the conflict itself isn't the problem. The way we as parents intervene in the conflict is what determines whether it's a constructive laboratory or just a chaotic wrestling match.
Precisely.
And the first foundational shift we have to make is abandoning the role of the referee and adopting the role of the mediator. Let's break that down.
This is a vital distinction in conflict resolution theory. Think about the mechanics of a referee in a basketball game.
Okay.
The referee observes a foul, blows a whistle to stop the play, assigns blame to a specific player, issues a penalty, and dictates exactly how the game will proceed from there.
That sounds exactly like what I do in the playroom.
Most of us do. When parents act as referees, they rush into the room, yell, "Who started this?" Snatch the contested toy away, declare a timeout, and enforce this really artificial, tense peace.
I mean, to be fair, that stops the screaming. That feels like a win in the moment.
It stops the screaming for exactly 6 minutes.
True.
But look at what it fails to do. It does absolutely nothing to teach the children how to resolve the next conflict.
Because we just solved it for them.
Right. It deprives them of the cognitive work of problem solving.
Mhm.
Furthermore, refereeing inevitably sets up a toxic psychological dynamic of the good kid and the bad kid, or the perpetual victim and the perpetual bully.
So what does the mediator do differently?
A mediator acts much more like a UN diplomat. A mediator does not care who started it, does not assign blame, and does not dictate the final solution.
Really?
No blame at all.
No blame. The mediator's entire job is to de-escalate the emotional temperature in the room and guide the conflicting parties to understand each other's perspectives so they can solve the problem themselves.
So part of adopting that mediator mindset means we have to let go of our cultural obsession with fairness and replace it with wisdom, because trying to be fair with a 3- and 5-year-old is a total trap.
It is a mathematical impossibility. Fairness implies identical treatment. But a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old have vastly different physiological and emotional needs.
Right.
Giving them identical treatment is actually kind of negligent. Wisdom is observing the situation and giving each child what they developmentally require in that specific moment, even if it looks entirely unequal from the outside.
Let's apply this practically. Let's look at a framework for sibling conflict, utilizing some principles from clinical psychologists like Dr. Siggy.
Great.
Let's imagine a scenario. The 5-year-old has spent 20 minutes meticulously building a massive tower out of magnetic tiles.
A masterpiece.
A masterpiece. Then the 3-year-old walks into the room, gets a glint in their eye, and Godzilla stomps the tower into absolute oblivion.
Oh boy.
The 5-year-old shrieks, shoves the 3-year-old, and the 3-year-old starts wailing. Total meltdown. Principle number 1 in this framework, don't take sides.
This is incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
Because our adult sense of justice screams that the 3-year-old is the clear aggressor. The 3-year-old destroyed the property.
Yeah, I'd want to put the 3-year-old in timeout instantly.
But if you rush in and instantly take the 5-year-old's side, if you say, "Why did you smash his tower? Go to your room,"
Yeah.
you unintentionally compromise your attachment with the 3-year-old and you fuel deep, lasting resentment.
Because the older child learns, Mom is my personal bodyguard, and the younger child learns, I am always the bad one.
Exactly. So instead, you approach the wreckage completely without indictment. Your first sentence shouldn't be an accusation. It should be an objective observation of the room.
Like narrating a documentary.
Yes. Wow, I hear a lot of screaming. I see broken tiles. I see 2 very upset kids. What's happening here? You remain completely neutral.
Which leads to principle number 2, which honestly sounds completely counterintuitive. Let them struggle safely.
Yeah.
Wait, if I let them struggle after a tower has been smashed and a shove has occurred, aren't I just inviting a fistfight? Where is the line between safe struggle and actual danger?
Good question. You are always guarding their bodies, but you are allowing their emotions to wrestle. Physical danger, like hitting, biting, throwing heavy objects that requires immediate physical separation, you step in and say, "I won't let you hit."
Okay, so physical boundary is firm.
Firm. But the struggle we want to allow is emotional distress. The 5-year-old's profound frustration at their ruined work, the 3-year-old's disappointment at being yelled at.
So we don't try to fix it right away.
No. If you swoop in and immediately try to fix the feelings, like saying, "Don't cry, I'll help you build a new tower right now," or "Here, have a cookie to feel better," you rob them of the chance to build emotional resilience.
Right.
They have to experience the intense discomfort of a rupture so they can learn that feelings, even terrible ones, eventually pass.
We have to just let them sit in the uncomfortable aftermath of the Godzilla stomp.
Exactly.
And then we move to principle 3. They must help solve the problem. If they have the cognitive capacity to engage in a conflict, They have the capacity to brainstorm a solution.
Right, so the parent facilitates the brainstorm, forcing the children to transition from their hyperactive amygdalas back into their prefrontal cortexes.
How do you do that in the moment?
You ask a simple question. We have a broken tower and 2 kids who want to play with the tiles. How do we fix this? The 5-year-old might say, he needs to leave my room forever.
Which is an extreme negotiation
It's
tactic.
very extreme. But you don't dismiss it. You turn to the 3-year-old and say, your brother suggests you leave the room forever. Does that work for you? The 3-year-old will inevitably say, no, I want to build.
And then what?
So you guide them again. Okay, leaving forever doesn't work. What's another idea?
You are literally forcing them to negotiate the terms of their own treaty.
Yes. And this requires the parent to adhere to Principle 4. It is not a crisis.
Sure feels like a crisis when they're screaming.
The children are screaming at decibel levels that absolutely signal a life or death emergency to our adult nervous systems. Evolution wired us to react to a child's scream with a massive spike of adrenaline.
It triggers my fight or flight instantly.
But it isn't a crisis. It's a disagreement over plastic magnets. The parent must be the grounded, steady anchor in the room. If you rush in, panicked and yelling, you escalate the entire situation. You basically validate their false sense of emergency.
Which ties perfectly into Principle 5. Don't add your own emotion to the mix.
This is where most parents fail. And it's so understandable. You bring your own exhaustion from work, your guilt about not spending enough time with them, and your frustration about the noise right into their conflict.
Yeah, I'm just mad that they woke the dog up.
Exactly. You throw the gasoline of your own emotional baggage onto their tiny fire.
Right.
You have to step back, take a deep breath, and mentally separate yourself. You are the guide. You are not a participant in the storm.
What's fascinating is that while we mediate these specific conflicts, there is one universally agreed upon preventative measure, a non-negotiable cure that drastically reduces the frequency of these fights in the first place.
Yes, there is.
And it has nothing to do with discipline. It's regular, predictable, one-on-one time with each parent.
It is the ultimate preventative medicine. At its core, sibling rivalry is an evolutionary competition for the parent's attention and resources.
So they're just fighting for us.
Yes. The children are constantly scanning to ensure they aren't being replaced or marginalized by the other. When you guarantee regular, undivided attention, you dismantle that scarcity mindset.
And this doesn't mean taking one kid to Disneyland while the other stays home.
Not at all. It's a 15-minute walk around the block with just the 5-year-old. It's taking just the 3-year-old to the grocery store and letting him hold the list.
That's so manageable.
It is. It's just 15 minutes of uninterrupted, phone-free time where that specific child does not have to share your gaze, your voice, or your physical affection with anyone else. It makes them feel deeply, individually seen.
So you're standing there as the mediator, taking deep breaths, trying not to react to the screaming over the magnetic tiles. But your ability to stay calm in that exact moment isn't just about willpower, right?
No, it's not.
It is actually governed by profound biological shifts that happened the moment you became a parent. Let's look at what's literally happening in the parents' bloodstreams, starting with the science of fatherhood.
Okay, this is amazing. For decades, the psychological establishment focused almost entirely on the mother-child bond, treating fathers as basically auxiliary support or secondary caregivers.
Like the backup quarterback.
Right. But modern neurobiology reveals that a father's body physically, dramatically alters in response to parenthood. When fathers actively engage in caregiving and play, their oxytocin levels actually spike.
Wait, oxytocin? I thought oxytocin is typically known as the bonding hormone, like heavily associated with pregnancy, childbirth, and nursing in mothers.
It is, yes. But men produce it too. In fathers, oxytocin is synthesized and released heavily through physical stimulation and active play. But here is the truly wild evolutionary mechanism.
Yeah.
As a man becomes deeply involved in the daily care of his children, his testosterone levels measurably drop.
Wait, evolution actually steps in and lowers a father's testosterone. What is the biological advantage of that?
It's a phenomenon called the mating to parenting trade-off.
Okay, what does that mean?
High testosterone drives risk-taking, aggression, and mate-seeking behaviors. When a child arrives, the evolutionary priority shifts from creating offspring to ensuring the survival of the existing offspring.
Oh, wow.
By lowering testosterone, biology naturally reduces the father's drive for outside risk and aggressive competition, optimizing his brain and body for nurturing, domestic focus, and hypervigilance regarding the family unit's safety.
That is incredible. The biology literally rewires to prioritize the child.
It really does.
But even with these nurturing hormones flowing, the way fathers interact with their children is often distinctly different from mothers. The data points heavily to the power of roughhousing.
Roughhousing is essential.
And I want to explore the mechanics of this.
Hmm?
How does tossing a 5-year-old onto a sofa or wrestling on the living room rug until everyone is dizzy translate into a developmental benefit?
If we look at the neurochemistry of rough and tumble play, it is actually a masterclass in nervous system regulation.
Really? How so?
When a father wrestles with a child, or tickles them, or tosses them in the air, the child's arousal levels absolutely skyrocket. Their heart rate increases, adrenaline flows, and they get hyper-excited.
The gas pedal is slammed to the floor.
Precisely. But during this play, they have to learn how to manage that intense excitement without losing control and hurting themselves or the parent. The father acts as the boundary.
If they get too wild.
Right. If the child bites or hits too hard, the play stops. So the child learns to regulate their physical output even when flooded with adrenaline. Furthermore, they take small tumbles, they get pinned, they experience a brief flash of frustration or fear, but in a completely safe, loving context.
So they realize, oh, I got knocked over, it was scary for a second, but I am totally fine.
It builds calculated risk tolerance. It teaches the developing nervous system that stress is not always a threat and that recovery from stress is possible. They are physically practicing resilience.
It's not just dad acting like a giant kid. It is a vital, irreplaceable developmental tool.
It absolutely is.
And the impact of fathers extends far beyond the physical play. There is a landmark study from Brigham Young University that examines a father's unique role in developing what they call stick-with-itness.
Stick-with-itness, yes. Persistence. The ability to endure frustration and complete a difficult task. The study found that a father's specific parenting style is the primary predictor of a child's lifelong persistence.
And what style is that?
The optimal style is called authoritative parenting.
Let's clearly define that, because authoritative often gets confused with authoritarian.
That are very different. Authoritarian parenting is my way or the highway. It is rigid compliance, high demands, and very low emotional warmth.
Okay, and authoritative.
Authoritative parenting, which is the gold standard, combines very high emotional warmth and love with clear rules, but grants the child age-appropriate autonomy. You hold the boundary firmly, but you explain the reasoning, and you are highly affectionate.
So there's warmth, but there are limits.
Exactly. When fathers consistently utilize this authoritative style, their children demonstrate significantly higher levels of persistence, better academic outcomes, and remarkably lower rates of delinquency in adolescence.
There is also a heavier, more sobering truth hidden in this data, isn't there? Research indicates that a father's rejection or absence can actually be a stronger predictor of a child's future psychological maladjustment, such as depression, anxiety, or behavioral issues, than a mother's rejection.
It completely dismantles the idea that fathers are secondary. They are primary pillars. On the positive side, an adult's self-reported sense of lifelong well-being is massively predicted by the simple knowledge that they were loved and accepted by their father.
So practically speaking, what does a 3- and 5-year-old need from dad to reap these benefits on a daily basis?
They need physical presence during vulnerable transitions. The data shows that a father's active presence during the bedtime routine is directly linked to lower baseline cortisol, the stress hormone in the children, throughout the entirety of the following day.
Just from doing bedtime.
Just from being a calm, grounding presence at bedtime, they also desperately need emotional acknowledgement from dad. When a father looks at a crying 3-year-old and says, "I see that you are very sad and angry," he is modeling for both his sons and his daughters that masculinity includes profound emotional depth and vocabulary.
So fathers are undergoing these specific hormonal shifts that optimize them for physical play, boundary setting, and presence. Meanwhile, mothers are experiencing a neurological and identity transformation so complete, so all-encompassing, that the scientific and anthropological communities gave it its own classification: matrescence.
Yes, matrescence. It's the physical, psychological, emotional, and social transition of becoming a mother. Anthropologists argue that this period of transition is just as significant, just as turbulent, and just as identity-altering as adolescence.
Like going through puberty again.
Basically, yes. Think about the hormonal cascade, the physical body changes, the complete reorientation of social status and personal identity that happens during puberty. Matrescence is the exact same scale of upheaval.
Yet society largely ignores it. The The cultural expectation is that a woman goes into the hospital, has a baby, and bounces back a few weeks later as the exact same person, just holding an infant.
That cultural expectation is biologically false. It's absurd. During pregnancy and the postpartum period, a mother's brain undergoes structural remodeling.
Like literally changing shape.
Yes, there is an actual pruning of gray matter in certain areas of the brain, which sounds alarming, but it is actually a hyperspecialization process. The brain is streamlining its neural networks to profoundly enhance the regions associated with theory of mind, empathy, and threat detection.
They develop a biological superpower, an almost intuitive emotional attunement to their children.
Their neural pathways are physically adapted to read the microexpressions on their child's face, to distinguish between a cry of pain and a cry of hunger, and to intuitively sense the emotional state of their offspring. It is a biological hypervigilance geared entirely toward the survival of the child.
Here's where it gets really interesting. When a mother utilizes that empathetic superpower to simply narrate what her child is feeling, she is performing a monumental act of brain building.
It's incredible to watch.
Imagine the 3-year-old is having a total meltdown because they have to leave the playground. If the mother stays calm, gets down on their level, and says, "You are so angry and disappointed right now because we have to leave the swings," she isn't just offering comfort.
No, she is acting as the neurochemical bridge. By naming the feeling out loud, the mother helps the child's brain integrate the chaotic, intense emotion firing from the amygdala with the logical language processing centers of the prefrontal cortex.
Because they can't do that connection themselves yet.
Right. You are taking an abstract, terrifying physiological sensation, anger, and giving it a concrete label and a boundary. You are building the literal neural pathways for emotional intelligence and self-regulation.
But this hypervigilant superpower comes with a massive, exhausting cost. The clinical literature refers to this as the sustainability problem. This is the realm of invisible labor.
Invisible labor. This is the relentless, unseen, mental and logistical scaffolding required to keep a family functioning. And it almost entirely defaults to the mother.
The best way I've heard to visualize this mental load is to imagine working on a computer. Having one program open is fine, but invisible labor is like having 30 complex tabs open on your browser while simultaneously running 4 heavy background applications.
Yes, perfect analogy.
You're tracking. We have 2 rolls of paper towels left. The 5-year-old needs a green shirt for school tomorrow. The 3-year-old's pediatrician appointment is in 2 weeks, and I need to fill out the forms. I haven't thawed the chicken for dinner. And my mother-in-law's birthday is Friday.
It never stops.
The processor is constantly running at 99% capacity. It drains the battery rapidly, even when the mother is physically sitting still on the couch, supposedly resting.
That background processing is deeply, deeply fatiguing. And this brings us to a definitive, non-negotiable point in the developmental literature. A regulated, rested mother is vastly more valuable to her children than an exhausted, perfect one.
We have to underline that for the listeners. Trying to be the perfect, Pinterest-ready mother who never misses a single detail will drain the battery to 0.
And when the battery's at 0, what happens? You lose access to your own prefrontal cortex, and you lose the ability to provide that crucial emotional attunement we just talked about.
So what's the solution?
Protecting maternal sleep and aggressively protecting the mother's identity outside of motherhood.
Which can feel so selfish.
It feels selfish, but it isn't. Whether that requires returning to work, maintaining a specific hobby, or just prioritizing friendships, it is not a selfish act. It is foundational to the sustainable neurological health of the entire family.
What do the 3- and 5-year-olds specifically need from this regulated mom?
They need 3 distinct things. First, they need to hear the word no, delivered with absolute love and 0 parental guilt.
That's tough. We always feel guilty saying no.
Mothers often carry immense cultural guilt for setting boundaries, fearing they are suppressing their child. But firm, loving boundaries make a chaotic world feel predictable and safe for a developing brain.
What's the second thing?
Second, they need to experience repair after a rupture.
Meaning that when the invisible labor gets too heavy, the tabs crash, and mom completely loses her temper and yells about shoes.
Exactly. Mom is human, she will lose her temper. But the magic happens in the repair.
Oh, so.
Going back to the 5-year-old later, getting on their level, say, "I am so sorry I yelled at you earlier. I was feeling very overwhelmed, but it is never okay for me to raise my voice at you." This is incredibly powerful.
It models accountability.
It does. It teaches the child that conflict and anger do not permanently destroy a relationship, which is the absolute foundation of secure attachment.
And the third thing they need.
Permission to be profoundly bored.
Bored. But we're supposed to enrich them constantly.
Mothers often internalize the pressure to constantly entertain, enrich, and stimulate their children. But unstructured, empty, boring time is the exact cognitive environment where a child's internal creativity, imagination, and independent problem-solving skills are forced to activate. Boredom is a gift you must allow them to unwrap.
Okay, we have covered massive ground here. We have the brain science of the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. We have the UN mediator blueprint for sibling conflict. We have the evolutionary biology of fatherhood and the structural brain changes of matricins.
We've covered a lot.
Now, we must synthesize all of this. How does this mountain of data translate into a random Tuesday afternoon? What are the highest ROI return on investment daily habits for raising a 3- and 5-year-old?
It begins with how we approach discipline. We have to completely redefine the word.
What should discipline mean?
The biological goal of discipline isn't to punish a child for a past mistake. It's to provide the cognitive tools for them to regulate their own behavior in the future.
And there are incredibly practical linguistic tweaks we can use based on how their brains process language. The best example is positive framing.
Positive framing is huge.
If your child is sprinting down the hallway, the instinct is to yell, "Don't run." But the science says you should say, "Walk, please." Why does that subtle shift matter so much?
It comes down to the mechanics of language processing in the brain. To understand a verb, the brain's motor cortex actually has to quickly simulate the action.
Oh, interesting.
When you yell, "Don't run," the child's brain first highlights and simulates the action running. Then the prefrontal cortex has to step in, apply a negation, and physically hit the brakes.
But we already know the 3-year-old has faulty brakes.
Exactly. So by saying, "Don't run," you are inadvertently priming their brain to run.
You are accidentally telling them to do the exact thing you want them to stop doing.
But when you say, "Walk, please," you bypass the need for cognitive negation entirely. You feed their brain the exact physical action you want them to simulate and execute. It is vastly more efficient.
Another really powerful tool is the concept of limited choices. You don't ask a 3-year-old, "What do you want to wear today?"
No, never.
That requires way too much executive function and just invites chaos. You ask, "Do you want the red shirt or the blue shirt?"
Exactly. You are giving them the autonomy their developing ego craves,
Yeah.
but entirely within the safe structure you have predetermined.
And when they inevitably resist that structure, we deploy natural consequences. Let's play out a realistic scenario to understand the boundaries of a natural consequence.
Let's do it.
It is 20 degrees outside, snowing, and the 3-year-old absolutely refuses to put on their heavy winter coat. The internet says, let them experience natural consequences. But am I supposed to let my toddler walk into a blizzard in a t-shirt and risk literal frostbite just to teach them a lesson?
Absolutely not. And this is where parents get very confused. A natural consequence must meet 3 strict criteria. It must be logical, it must be proportional, and above all, it must be completely safe.
So no frostbite.
No frostbite. Allowing a child to risk hypothermia is negligent, not educational. In the snow scenario, the safe, logical consequence of refusing a coat isn't freezing. The consequence is losing the privilege of the environment.
So what do you say?
You say, coats keep our bodies safe in the snow. If you choose not to wear your coat, you are choosing to stay inside the house. It is directly tied to the behavior, it is enforceable, and it maintains their physical safety.
That is so clear. And when we catch them doing things right, how we praise them rewires their brain too. We have to stop praising innate traits, right? Like, we shouldn't say, "You're so smart," or "You're such a good boy."
Right. Praising innate traits builds a fragile, fixed mindset. If they fail at something later, they internalize it as, "I must not be smart anymore."
So what do we praise instead?
You praise the effort and the process. You worked incredibly hard on that puzzle, or I saw how patient you were while waiting for your turn. This wires their brain for a growth mindset, teaching them that persistence and effort are the actual metrics of success.
Moving beyond discipline, we have to establish the non-negotiable routines. We discussed earlier how predictability spares the brain's glucose. What specific anchor points in the day provide the highest return?
The anchor points establish the circadian rhythm and the emotional baseline. A consistent wake-up sequence is vital, but the most heavily researched anchor is the family mealtime without screens.
No screens at the table.
None. But clinical data strongly, undeniably links regular screen-free family dinners to higher academic vocabularies, lower rates of depression in adolescents, and greater emotional resilience. It forces conversation and eye contact.
And what else?
Alongside that, the child requires 60 minutes of mandatory active outdoor play every single day.
Why outside? Why not just play down in the basement playroom?
The physical environment outside the uneven ground, the varying light, the wind, provides complex sensory input that forces the brain to calibrate proprioception and balance.
Yeah.
It heavily regulates the nervous system in a way indoor play simply cannot replicate.
Let's talk about the biological necessity of sleep. The CDC guidelines for this age group are 10 to 13 hours per night. That is a massive chunk of the day.
It is. Because sleep is when the brain physically cleans itself of toxins and consolidates all the memories and skills learned that day. Hitting that 10 to 13-hour mark requires a biological wind-down.
You can't just flip a switch.
No, you cannot expect a child to go from brightly lit, high-energy play straight to sleep. They require a predictable 30 to 60-minute transition in dimmed lighting to signal the pineal gland to release melatonin.
So when should they go to bed?
For a 3- and 5-year-old, the biological optimal window for bedtime to align with their natural circadian rhythms falls somewhere between 7:30 and 8:30 p.m.
Okay, we also need to touch on the hardcore safety guidelines from the CDC, specifically regarding car seats and screens.
Yes, car seat physics are non-negotiable. The guideline is to keep the child in a forward-facing seat with a 5-point harness until they reach the absolute maximum height or weight limit specified by the seat manufacturer. Only then do you transition to a booster seat in the back.
And what is the science behind delaying the booster seat?
The reason is anatomical. The 5-point harness distributes the massive kinetic force of a crash across the strongest bones of the body, the shoulders and the pelvis. A booster seat relies on the vehicle feed belt, which requires the child's iliac crest, the top of the pelvis bone, to be fully developed.
To keep the belt in place.
Yes, to prevent the belt from crushing the soft organs of the abdomen during a crash. A 3-year-old's pelvis is simply not ossified enough for a seatbelt.
That structural reality makes the guideline make total sense. And what about the developmental reality of screen time?
Screen time is a dopamine lever. High-paced children's programming features rapid scene cuts, sometimes every few seconds. A toddler's visual cortex processes information slowly.
So the fast cuts are bad?
Very bad. The rapid scene cuts trigger the brain's orienting response, which is a primal reflex to pay attention to sudden changes in the environment. It floods the brain with dopamine, creating a trance-like state. But it actively degrades their ability to sustain focus on slow, real-world tasks.
So that's why they melt down when you turn the TV off.
Exactly. This is why the guidelines strictly limit screen time to 1 to 2 hours of high-quality, slow-paced programming and mandate absolutely no screens in the bedroom to protect sleep architecture.
Okay, if we distill this entire hour down, out of all the routines, the discipline frameworks, the psychological strategies, what is the single, ultimate, highest return on investment habit a parent can execute with a 3- and 5-year-old?
The developmental psychology community is completely unanimous on this one. It is reading aloud together. It is the single most powerful activity you can do.
Really? Just reading?
Yes. Regular reading aloud predicts future vocabulary size, academic readiness, and parent-child attachment security with greater accuracy than almost any other metric.
But there is a specific mechanism to doing it right, isn't there? It's called dialogic reading. You aren't just reading the words on the page monotonously.
Correct. The magic is in the interactive questioning. You pause the story. You point to the illustration and ask the 3-year-old, where is the dog? What color is the ball? You are building basic vocabulary and spatial recognition.
And for the older one?
Then you turn to the 5-year-old and ask, look at the dog's face. How do you think he feels right now? What do you think he is going to do on the next page?
Oh, wow. You are literally forcing the 5-year-old to practice theory of mind, empathy, and logical prediction.
Exactly. Dialogic reading engages multiple regions of the brain simultaneously. It builds phonemic awareness, emotional intelligence, and auditory processing. It does more neurological heavy lifting than any expensive educational toy or application in existence.
So what does this all mean? We have journeyed deep into the specific brain architecture of 3- and 5-year-olds. We've mapped the diplomatic mediation of their sibling conflicts. We've explored the profound evolutionary biology of fatherhood, the literal brain rewiring of motherhood, and the granular daily habits that actually build resilience. What it means for you, the listener, is that the pressure to be perfect is a biological myth.
The years between 3 and 5 are undeniably the most plastic formative years for human brain development. but the inputs required to optimize that development are remarkably simple.
They don't need us to be flawless.
They do not need a flawless parent. They need felt safety. They need emotional attunement. They need age-appropriate boundaries. And they need parents who possess the humility to say, I messed up today and I am sorry, thereby teaching them how to repair a broken connection.
Just by engaging with this deep dive, just by taking the time to understand the mechanisms of their amygdala, the physics of their safety, and the reality of your own biological shifts, you are already providing the deep intentionality your children desperately need. You are doing the heavy lifting.
But I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. We have spent this entire deep dive analyzing how the biology, the routines, and the actions of the parents shape the rapidly developing brains of the children.
Right.
But consider the reverse. Consider the profound reality of matrescence, the evolutionary hormonal shifts of fatherhood, the daily grueling trials of your patients, and the constant subjugation of your own ego. These experiences, these daily fires you put out, are literally, structurally rewiring your adult brain. What if the ultimate secret of this exhausting, chaotic, beautiful phase isn't just about you raising thriving kids? What if it's about these kids raising you into the exact adult, the exact capable, empathetic human being you were always meant to become?
So the next time you find yourself standing in the kitchen, completely covered in blueberry smoothie from a blender that was missing its lid, take a deep breath. Remember that you aren't just cleaning up a mess. You are being remade. Keep going.